sommes ravis de vous accueillir parmi nous aujourd'hui pour cette 4e rencontre du cycle de conférences Morocco21. Ce cycle qui puise ses inspirations du nouveau modèle de développement et qui vise à approfondir l'expertise, la réflexion et le partage de connaissances. Morocco21 se veut donc une plateforme d'échange, de recommandations pour participer à la construction du Maroc de demain. Le Morocco21 bénéficie du soutien du ministère de la Transition énergétique et du Développement durable et il se tient en partenariat également avec Bank of Africa, qui est un partenaire tout aussi engagé que nous à contribuer au développement du Maroc et de l'Afrique. La conférence d'aujourd'hui aborde la thématique des industries culturelles et créatives, leur apport, leur potentiel. Et il est vrai que le concept n'est pas nouveau. Le terme a d'ailleurs été inventé dans les années 40. Et depuis, les façons de créer, de produire, de distribuer les produits culturels n'ont cessé d'augmenter, d'évoluer, de se développer, de changer. Aujourd'hui, c'est acté, les industries culturelles et créatives sont un moteur de développement, d'innovation et du changement technologique. Ils se présentent comme un avantage comparatif dans le développement des territoires et des institutions. Le secteur culturel est désormais au premier rang des préoccupations des pays qui veulent valoriser leur patrimoine. Sous l'impulsion de Sa Majesté, le Maroc a d'ailleurs entrepris ces dernières années plusieurs actions dans ce sens et continue à consolider sa stratégie et ses orientations pour la promotion de la culture. Dans cette même vision, nos collectivités développent de plus en plus de stratégies territoriales basées notamment sur la culture. Et je vous invite à saluer les efforts et les initiatives remarquables de la ville de Rabat qui nous accueille aujourd'hui. Ville des Lumières, capitale culturelle de l'Afrique et du monde islamique. Je saisis cette occasion pour remercier vivement Madame Leila Bilra, adjointe au maire de Rabat, chargée des industries culturelles et créatives. Merci de nous honorer de votre présence. Merci. Le concept des industries créatives et culturelles a vu le jour au Royaume-Uni. Et depuis, ce pays n'a cessé de nous épater à travers des stratégies de développement et de promotion de la culture et des arts, se positionnant ainsi en modèle d'inspiration confirmé. C'est donc tout naturellement que l'expertise londonienne sur le sujet s'invite aujourd'hui sur notre scène. Justine Simons est notre invitée pour cette 4e conférence Morocco21. Elle est adjointe au maire de Londres, elle est chargée des industries culturelles et créatives, et elle est présidente du WCC Forum. Et dans cet écosystème des industries culturelles, les musées jouent un rôle essentiel. Ils ont la mission d'enrichir culturellement et d'éduquer les publics. Ils se présentent comme des plateformes d'expression de certaines de ces industries. C'est donc en toute logique et cohérence que notre conférence se tient donc aujourd'hui dans ce magnifique établissement, le musée Mohamed VI d'art moderne et contemporain qui a pu voir le jour grâce à un homme dévoué, tant pour son pays que pour les arts et la culture, au Maroc et bien au-delà. Vous le savez, il s'agit bien de Mehdi Qotbi, Monsieur Mehdi Qotbi, président de la Fondation nationale des musées du Royaume du Maroc. Merci pour tout ce que vous faites. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Merci de nous accueillir chez vous. Je vous prie de me rejoindre sur scène et je vous prie de l'accueillir chaleureusement.
Je suis désolé, je vais vous contredire. Je ne vais pas vous rejoindre sur scène. Je vais rester à mon niveau. Messieurs les ministres, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, pour ne pas faire d'erreur, Madame Justine Simons OBE, très bien. Madame l'adjoint au maire de Londres, et j'espère d'ailleurs, avant de continuer, j'espère surtout que nous pourrons, la Fondation nationale des musées et la mairie de Londres, pouvoir établir des passerelles de collaboration. J'ai vu que Monsieur l'ambassadeur est dans les meilleures dispositions pour soutenir des projets, car le Maroc est ouvert sur tous les autres pays. Et on est vraiment heureux de vous accueillir, madame, heureux de vous accueillir tous, merci. Attendez, on m'a écrit quelque chose, il faut quand même que je suis quand même ce qui est écrit. Je voudrais saluer l'initiative de M. Déby, président du Newscom Africa. Avant de passer à M. le ministre la parole, je voudrais vous dire le nouveau modèle de développement lancé par Sa Majesté le roi Mohammed VI accorde une grande importance au développement de la culture et des industries créatives. Et la culture étant un domaine de partage, et je crois que vous tous, vous le savez, c'est pouvoir échanger entre les différentes cultures, les différentes religions, et c'est dans ce cadre que nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir cette conférence organisée par le Morocco21 Forum. Je voudrais simplement un peu aussi vous souligner, grâce à la vision de Sa Majesté le Roi, c'est ce développement extraordinaire qui connaît le Maroc aujourd'hui. Et que ce Maroc, notre pays, le Maroc, est pris en exemple dans le monde pour cette dynamique culturelle, bien évidemment insufflée par Sa Majesté le Roi. Vous m'avez tout à l'heure disant qu'il y a un développement culturel, il y a un dynamisme. Je voudrais souligner que ce dynamisme est une équipe. Ce n'est pas simplement Midi Kotbi, c'est une équipe. Cette équipe est composée des membres de la Fondation nationale des musées et qui font un travail exceptionnel. Je voudrais aussi rendre hommage à l'équipe du musée Mohammed VI et à leur tête, M. Idrissi, qui fait un travail remarquable. Il est, je dirais, sur tous les fronts. Et je peux vous dire aussi, vous annoncer que dans les semaines à venir, nous allons ouvrir un 15e musée à Marrakech. Nous allons aussi ouvrir un musée le mois d'après à Agadir, à Azilal. C'est-à-dire qu'aucun coin du Maroc ne sera oublié, car l'accès à la culture est un devoir de chacun, pour que chaque Marocain puisse savoir et connaître sa culture et lui permettre de s'ouvrir sur la culture des autres. Je vous remercie infiniment de votre présence. C'est un encouragement de vous avoir aujourd'hui si nombreux. Merci encore, messieurs les ministres, madame la maire, monsieur l'ambassadeur et vous tous d'être venus, d'avoir pris le temps un vendredi de venir pour pouvoir un peu échanger et enrichir par votre présence ce débat. Monsieur le ministre.
Merci beaucoup, Mehdi. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, monsieur le ministre, monsieur le président de la Fondation, madame la vice-présidente de la grande ville de Rabat, ville des Lumières, chers collègues, chers amis. C'est un plaisir pour moi. Ce n'était pas prévu que je fasse un mot parce que je voulais juste assister à cette belle conférence qui m'a beaucoup inspiré sur le plan intellectuel. Mais je voudrais féliciter Morocco21 et féliciter pour toutes les actions que vous faites, mais et plus particulièrement pour celle d'aujourd'hui, qui tombe, j'allais dire, à point nommé par rapport à ce que nous sommes en train de faire dans le ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur, de la recherche scientifique et de l'innovation. Comme je le disais tout à l'heure à quelques amis, il y a longtemps, on a cru que la culture, que l'art était un dessert qui était fait que pour les gens riches qui finalement arrivent à goûter, arrivent éventuellement à voir les choses de manière un peu de plus près. Et qu'aujourd'hui, je pense qu'on a compris que c'est plutôt un plat de résistance et que c'est quelque chose qui doit être, j'allais dire, démocratisé à l'échelle, je dirais, de toute la nation, de toutes les nations. Et notre ministère, dans le cadre de ce qu'il est en train de rénover aujourd'hui, à partir de la rentrée prochaine, nous avons introduit de manière obligatoire dans tous les modules, dans toutes les formations, un module qui est plutôt art et culture, et dont ces modules, bien évidemment, qui vont chaque semestre vont changer de forme, ben, il y a tout l'aspect culturel, patrimoine marocain, patrimoine artistique, patrimoine culinaire, patrimoine musical, patrimoine, j'allais dire, sur tous les plans, de telle sorte à ce que la jeunesse, d'abord quand elle vient à l'université, que le milieu social ne soit pas une dimension qui permet aux jeunes de pouvoir, j'allais dire, réussir leur vie personnelle ou leur vie professionnelle. Et nous allons aussi, pendant cette année 2023, nous allons faire une grande manifestation qui va tourner à l'échelle nationale avec des étudiants. C'est le droit et l'art. Ça veut dire qu'on va faire, en quelque sorte, vulgariser le droit à travers l'art avec plusieurs de nos artistes marocains et qui vont, qui ont concocté un certain nombre de tableaux, un certain nombre je dirais, de pièces qui vont permettre de vulgariser le droit pour les jeunes et moins jeunes, mais de manière artistique. L'idée est de mettre toute la partie culture et art au milieu des préoccupations pédagogiques pour une raison toute simple. C'est qu'il y a longtemps, on a cru aussi que la formation se résumait à la présence dans un amphithéâtre, comme vous êtes assis sagement, et que maintenant nous avons compris que c'est vraiment au-delà, et nous sommes rentrés dans l'ère de l'empowerment, dans l'ère de la capacitation. Comment capaciter les individus? Et pour les capacités, bien évidemment, tous les aspects transversaux, et l'aspect culturel, l'aspect artistique, on est vraiment un élément indispensable. Je suis très fier de voir que notre pays, grâce aux orientations et l'impulsion de Sa Majesté, que Dieu l'assiste, est entré dans cette phase. Et je pense, comme l'a dit Simedi, bien évidemment, nous connaissons le musée et le développement du musée à travers Simedi, mais comme il l'a dit lui-même, c'est plutôt une task force, une équipe qui s'est mise au service de cette thématique dans notre pays et qu'il faut absolument continuer à développer, à donner les occasions pour que la jeunesse puisse créer et puisse aussi avoir cette dynamique de créativité et d'innovation. Et je pense qu'à travers l'art, à travers les activités, je dirais, de groupe que les jeunes vont pouvoir s'émanciper. L'exemple qui me vient à l'esprit, c'est ce qu'est en train de développer le Nigeria avec Nollywood, ce que l'Inde a fait avec Bollywood dans le cadre du cinéma. Mais il y a d'autres activités. Et je pense que nous avons en Afrique, nous avons une richesse extraordinaire qu'il faut absolument fructifier, qu'il faut développer. Dans les pays africains et donc le Maroc, nous avons la chance d'avoir une caractéristique presque linéaire de développement de la jeunesse. Et nous savons que tous les pays qui se sont développés pendant cette phase. Et vu ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, nous avons besoin de têtes bien faites, pas forcément bien pleines, mais nous avons besoin de jeunes qui ont un esprit élastique. Il ne peut être élastique qu'à travers, justement, toutes les activités d'art, de culture. Et je pense que ces activités-là sont essentielles. Nous les introduisons de manière obligatoire, mais pas dans le sens d'embêter les jeunes, mais de manière obligatoire pour que toutes les j'allais dire, les couches sociales, quand elles viennent à l'université, il faut qu'elles puissent avoir l'accès à tous ces éléments-là. L'art, le sport, la culture sont des éléments qui sont devenus aujourd'hui indispensables. Je tiens encore une fois à vous féliciter et puis à remercier Simedi Qotbi qui a insisté pour que je vienne et c'est un grand plaisir que d'être parmi vous. Merci.
Sans plus attendre, je vais vous demander d'applaudir Madame Justine Simons, qui partage avec nous l'expérience londonienne sur les industries culturelles et créatives. Merci bien.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Justine Simons. I am the Deputy Mayor for Culture and the Creative Industries in London. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here in the wonderful city of Rabat, in a room full of leaders and experts from across government, business, culture, education, and of course we have artists and creatives here. It's wonderful to have the Deputy Mayor, Mrs. Leila Bira here, and Ambassador Martin, and to be hosted in this extraordinary museum by Mr. Mehdi Kopbi. So thank you to Mr. Dahabi, Mrs. Lihamani, and all at Newscom Africa Holdings, and to the Bank of Africa for your very kind invitation. So, here we go. Great. So today I'm here to explore what culture and creativity can offer us. We've turned the lights down so you can see the images. Why should anyone care about culture and creativity in today's world? Well, let's start there with the big picture. What does today's world look like? Well, I'm sure you'll agree that the world is a complicated place and it's changing at lightning speed. No. There we go. Okay. The world is changing at lightning speed. Our climate is in crisis. There's war and mass migration with millions of refugees fleeing poverty and conflict. Racism has not gone away. And our democracies are more fragile than we perhaps thought. Political and economic power bases are changing. In the UK, for example, we've been divided by Brexit, having left the European Union, which was our biggest trading partner. And if all of this wasn't enough, we are in the middle of a technological transformation. Our lives seem to be run by algorithms that we don't quite understand. And although the world is smarter and more connected, for example, we can video call people in another continent and get a college degree in our bedroom. Social media is causing anxiety and people are lonely. And of course, we're emerging from a global pandemic. All these things are transforming the world as we know it. Fingers crossed. Yeah. So I think we can conclude that there's lots about the world today that's stressing us out. Experts, they've got a word for it. They call it perma-crisis. So I think there's only one thing that we can be absolutely certain of: change. Change is now the only constant in today's world. So as we face these very deep challenges, as the tectonic plates shift, the question I think we're all asking is, what does the future hold for us? And how can we survive it? And looking through the lens that we're considering today for this conference, many people would ask, where does culture fit into this picture? Where does culture fit into this picture? Well, the fact is, culture does not exist in a bubble. It's woven into our lives, our cities, our politics, and our communities. It can play a much deeper role across the whole of society. And there's a growing understanding of this all across the globe. I'm chair of the World Cities Culture Forum, and that's a leadership network of over 40 global cities. Let's see if we can have a picture. Yep, that's us. Nope. That's it. So this is our World Cities Leadership Group in Lisbon, and we're the largest network of global cities promoting culture as a vital part of world cities. From Paris to Tokyo, Buenos Aires to Los Angeles, Dubai to Montreal. As global cities, we all share similar challenges. There's so much we can do together. And of course, we'd love Rabat to join us too. We're civic leaders with a mission to build a world where culture and creativity are a golden thread at the heart of thriving cities. And why are we on this mission? Because we know that creativity is a major untapped resource. We know that creativity can do so much more for our societies and our economies. And we know we're all sitting on a gold mine that we just need to unlock. Because too often, the story of culture has been this. This is the old story. Culture is sitting at the bottom of the list, vulnerable when budgets get tight and there are other priorities. But this is the real story. Not that. There. This is the real story, the new story, that culture can make a difference across all aspects of society. When I made these last two slides about 10 years ago, I would say that they were aspirational. But now they're much closer to reality, because around the world we're seeing the value of culture and creativity shifting. Culture has gone from a niche to a mainstream issue. And to unpack this, today I'm going to talk about my own city, the London story. Great. And today we're going to look at how important creativity is to London. We've always known it's part of London's identity. Whether that was punk music in the 1970s or grime music today. Or film. The cinema is where many people from around the world first get to meet London. So whether you meet London through a glossy James Bond movie. Oops, we've missed out James Bond. Yeah, there's James Bond. Or you meet London through platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station, where Harry Potter takes the train to Hogwarts. What wasn't really widely understood in the UK until a few decades ago is just what a major role the creative industries and our culture play in London and the UK as a whole, and how critical they are to our success in London as a successful world city. As a small island nation, the creative industries, they elevate us beyond our size. They help us win lots of Oscars and Grammys. From a national perspective, there we go. Looking at the national picture, the creative industries are bigger in the UK than the car industry, life sciences, aerospace, oil and gas put together, combined. And as the capital, London is the engine room of the creative economy. To give you the headlines, before the pandemic, the creative industries in London were generating $70 billion a year for the London economy. Almost 9 million people live and work in London, and 1 in 6 of every job in London is a creative one. The creative economy has also been growing very fast, 4 times faster than the base economy. It's also a productivity goldmine, 20% more productive than the average jobs. And in our evolving labour market, the creative industries are a great asset. We know that the majority of school children today in London will end up doing a job that does not yet exist. And we know that automation is a growing trend, with robots increasingly doing the jobs that humans do. But we also know that 90% of jobs in the creative industries are at very low risk of automation. Why? Because you can't automate the imagination. And imagination, innovation, ideas are the fuel that drive the creative economy. But imagination is also essential for society and for the economy as a whole. All businesses today cite creativity as a core skill, something that will give them the edge over their competitors. And historically, you only have to consider Leonardo da Vinci, who was part artist and part engineer, to remind ourselves of this connection. So, creativity matters. As Einstein said, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will get you everywhere. Creativity and culture also drive London's visitor economy. 4 out of 5 people tell us that culture is the reason they come to visit and live in London. London welcomed over 30 million tourists before the pandemic, and 4 out of 5 of them coming for culture is very significant. What tourists tell us is they want something authentic. They want authentic London. They don't want brand London. They don't want a globalized experience where everyone is drinking the same brand of coffee and wearing the same brand of trainers. They want to get under the skin of the city. They want to live like a local and get off the beaten track. And this is where culture and creativity are an essential ingredient, because they bring authenticity, a unique story. But we can't take this for granted. So in London, we're working really hard to protect and grow our city as a creative capital. We've got 2 watchwords: hardwire and future-proof. So our goal is to hardwire creativity into the system to stop it from being so vulnerable as London grows, and to future-proof it because we want to remain a creative capital long into the future. At City Hall, we don't tend to have really big budgets or a lot of power, so we focus on what is within our gift. What can we do at City Hall in London to bring a positive influence to the creative industries? I describe our work as acupuncture, finding the sweet spot where we have the power to create real change. So with that in mind, I'd love to share with you today 5 ideas from London. Number 1, the first is tactical. Growing the creative economy. So over the last 2 decades, there has been support and strategic policies in London for our creative industries. We try to create the right conditions for the creative industries to thrive rather than control them directly. I often say that creativity is a bit like a teenager. It doesn't like to be told what to do. So the question for us is, how can government help? The UK's national government gives creative industry tax breaks to encourage inward investment. And in London, for example, we've set up our own agency called Film London to make the most of this government policy. So Film London, our film agency, their job is to promote and grow London as a leading filmmaking capital. They're a one-stop service for the world's film industry, and they help with everything from locations even to hotel deals. And since we established Film London, they've grown the film industry by 30% in London. So it's a really successful model for us. We've been working with London Fashion Week to grow its status alongside the big other 3 major fashion weeks in Paris, Milan, and New York. We've been supporting new generations of designers and brands, growing them into the global marketplace. The Mayor also supports the London Design Festival. Now it's in its 20th year, to promote London as a design capital and to encourage trade. And more recently, we've established Games London. Games London is an umbrella body. Again, its job is to grow the industry. We now have the London Games Festival and business-to-business trade platforms. So our work with film, with fashion, with design, with games, it's all part of the Mayor of London's Creative Industries Investment Programme. And then thinking about infrastructure, to meet the growing demand for film studios, for example, we're building lots of new ones in London. This is Eastbrook Studios in East London. It's just being developed. It's got 12 stages, and it will be the largest film studio in London for the last 25 years. And if we look to the future, our film industry has 25,000 job vacancies right now, and they need to be filled in the next few years. So under the Mayor's guidance, we've created a skills academy for the creative industries, bringing together the film industry and education to make sure that we're training people in the jobs and the skills that are needed today in the workplace. All right, idea 2, I describe as hardwiring, unlocking the secret power of the planning system. So we know in London that our success is fragile. It's like an iceberg. It might look okay on the surface, there we go. It might look okay on the surface, but below the waterline, there are some big challenges. A big one is the unprecedented speed of development, putting pressure on our venues, our artist studios, and our clubs. Over the last decade, we've lost lots of different aspects of our cultural infrastructure. 50% of nightclubs have gone, 40% of music venues, and a 30% loss of creative workspaces. But all these local, small grassroots spaces, they're really vital for us because they are the incubators of the next generation of artists, of musicians, and of DJs. Creatives, they're often described as the shock troops of regeneration, moving into cheap and unloved places, breathing life into rundown areas. They raise land values, but then they get priced out. But we need creative talent in London. We need those photographers, designers, set builders, instrument technicians. All of these specialist skills are essential. Together, this workforce is holding up this economic powerhouse that generates billions of pounds for London. So one new experiment in London is called our Creative Enterprise Zones. So they are designed to fix this problem of artists and creatives being forced out of areas because rents are so expensive. So that artists can put down roots in areas they've committed to. They're protected zones and they offer low-cost creative space for the long term. These creative enterprise zones are also about the community. They provide training for local people to get the future jobs. And they disrupt the market cycle, keeping creative workers in London by hardwiring creative industries into the planning system. And the good news is they're working. We now have 9 creative enterprise zones across London, and we're on course to deliver 65,000 square metres of affordable studio space in the next few years. The cost of property in London is a really big issue. So another experiment is called the Creative Land Trust. And this is an interesting model. It's a social investment model. The trust buys property and it uses it then for studios at a low cost. And these are permanent studios, not temporary ones. So again, we're trying to create this long-term solution to the problem that we have. We've also developed a strategy, a cultural infrastructure plan. Oops. Too quick. There we go. A cultural infrastructure plan, because just as we plan for things like schools and housings, we need to plan for culture too. As well as good transport and roads, all cities need a soul. So for the first time, there's now formal planning protection for artist workspaces, for music venues and nightclubs. And that's what I mean when I talk about hardwiring things into the planning system. So, on to idea 3. You had a sneak preview. Let's see. Idea 3 is emblematic. Big ideas. The Olympics and its legacy. So 10 years ago, London staged the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. It was a time of great civic pride and confidence for us, a global stage when we looked out to the world. And culture played a really big part. The Cultural Olympiad was our biggest festival ever. And a decade on, coming out of the pandemic, it's really important for us to reconnect with that Olympic energy and confidence. So I'm delighted that culture is now at the heart of the Olympic legacy. So in the Olympic Park in East London, which is the poorest part of our city, we're building the biggest culture and education district in London in 150 years. It's called East Bank, and it will include dance and music venues, a museum, and 2 universities. It will create 2,500 jobs, attract 1.5 million visitors, and generate almost $2 billion for the London economy. And that, I think, is because we've got to keep going with these emblematic and ambitious projects like this, especially as we are recovering from the global pandemic. This next slide, not that one. Yep, this next slide is me at the topping out, the completing ceremony for the Sadler's Wells dance venue, which will also include the first hip-hop academy. So East Bank is changing the energy of London as a city. London is moving east. All this world-class culture will be in the heart of some of the most deprived communities in the UK. And that's very deliberate because we know what a powerful force for change culture can be. Which brings me to number 4. Human connection. We know that culture also offers us something deeper, a human connection in a digital world. Sitting in a theatre or going to a festival connects us with each other. In big urban cities like London, loneliness is a really big issue. But culture can bring people together and create social bonds. As the artist Grayson Perry once said, let's see, life without art would be a series of emails. So we know that culture can have a profound and positive influence on our health. Ballroom dancing has been shown to cut dementia by 76%, and we're seeing doctors prescribing culture instead of drugs as a way to reduce stress, anxiety, and to improve our mental and physical health. We know that music and theatre are giving more young people confidence, team skills, and empathy. So we created the London Borough of Culture Award in London. It's the Mayor's flagship, where one of London's 32 boroughs wins the crown for a year. It shines a spotlight on a whole area. Let's see. Here we go. Stay. London Borough of Culture. It shines a spotlight on a whole local borough for a year. And the idea is to reveal the stories of the people and the place through culture. After just 2 awards, we had over 2,000 partners, 20 funders came on board, growing our budget 4-fold. Over 200 schools got involved, and over 1,500 Londoners volunteered to be part of it. And when the COVID pandemic hit, the volunteers came back together and became the emergency response team, showing how culture can bring us together and help us build more resilient communities. And resilience is number 5, the last one on my list. There we go, great. Most recently, recovering from the pandemic has been our major focus in London. It sent the city centre into a crisis in London. Global tourism for us collapsed. We lost 21 million international visitors. People left the city centre for more space, and there were no office workers coming in. They weren't buying lunch, and they weren't going to the theatre. Central London became a ghost town. People were anxious to go back into public spaces in case they caught COVID. So we needed to rebuild trust and confidence in our city. We also realised that instead of our competition being other global cities, which was the usual competition, we had a new competitor. It was the sofa. Let's try. There we go. People got comfortable on the sofa, watching Netflix and staying at home. So we had to remind people what they're missing. and why coming back into London to experience culture is so great. So I led a major tourism campaign for the mayor. It was called Let's Do London. And it was the biggest campaign we'd ever run. Yep. And it was all driven by culture and the creative industries. We started with seasons of free culture in outdoor spaces, from light spectaculars to classic films in major squares. Normally festivals, they happen in populated areas, but we programmed this festival in the empty parts of the city, using culture as a tool to attract people back. It was a data-led festival, and it worked. It brought in 585,000 new visitors to London and an additional $360 million spent. So to recap on 5 ideas I've shared with you today. Here we go. Idea 1, tactical, growing the creative economy, like acupuncture. Hardwiring, culture embedded in the planning system to protect it for the long term. Emblematic, big ideas that capture the imagination. For us, the Olympic legacy. The human connection, the way in which culture can bring us together and create those social bonds. For example, the London Borough of Culture. And resilience, culture at the heart of our recovery programme, driving tourism post-pandemic. So I hope I've shown why in London and in global cities around the world, we need culture and creativity more than ever. And why they're such a goldmine waiting to be unlocked. They are essential ingredients in our economies, our infrastructure, our health, our education, and our communities. And we just can't count the value of them on a simple spreadsheet alone. Because not everything that counts can be counted. We know that culture, we know we must change our balance sheet to reflect what matters to us. This is our old balance sheet. But today's balance sheet must be much more holistic. There you go. Today's balance sheet needs to be more holistic. We need healthy economies, and we also need good jobs, well-being, quality of life, and human connection. And in this holistic world, culture is not an optional extra, it's essential. Culture is boosting tourism, packing out our museums, stacking up awards, bringing communities together, improving our health and well-being as citizens. And for all of these reasons, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has declared culture a top priority. This is the first time a Mayor of London has elevated culture and given such a priority status to culture in the creative industries. So culture now sits alongside housing, crime, and the environment as a city priority. The Mayor and I describe culture and creativity as London's DNA. Culture really is our superpower. Because to return to where I started, the world in the 21st century is full of complex challenges. So to solve them, we must adapt to this complexity. Culture can do this. It can be a catalyst for positive change at a personal level, a city level, and at a global level. But it's not guaranteed. So it's the collective task of all of us to unlock the power and potential of creativity in our societies. As my hero said, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we must fight for the things that we care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join us. So join me in my mission to unlock the power of culture for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Simons, for this interesting presentation.
Mesdames et messieurs, merci d'avoir suivi cette intervention. On fait place à vos questions-réponses. On ouvre une session de questions-réponses.
Okay, are there any questions? There's a mic there. There's a hand up there.
Merci beaucoup, madame. J'avoue que vous êtes exceptionnellement intéressante et votre exposé est vraiment sublime. Je sais qu'il y a pas mal de gouvernants, entre guillemets, ici parmi nous. J'espère qu'ils seront très imprégnés du contenu de votre présentation qui est merveilleuse. J'ai beaucoup appris personnellement. Et ma question est, j'ai appris il y a longtemps que un jour, pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, un journaliste a posé la question à Churchill en lui disant, il faudrait, non pas un journaliste, mais un conseiller lui dit, il faut absolument qu'on coupe le budget culturel. Et Monsieur Churchill, qui est un homme évidemment exceptionnellement éloquent, lui a dit, pourquoi voulez-vous qu'on coupe ou qu'on réduise le budget de la culture? Parce que c'est pour ça qu'on se bat contre l'obscurantisme allemand de l'époque, évidemment, contre le nazisme, etc. Pourquoi voulez-vous qu'on coupe ce budget? On ne le coupera pas. Êtes-vous encore dans cet esprit-là, madame? Voilà. Merci, c'est tout.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you so much for your kind words. Yes, I am in that spirit. But as I described, it's very difficult often when you are a mayor or a politician to argue for culture because, you know, if you ask people what they care about and what are their political priorities, the general public will usually say crime, policing, transport, health, housing. They'll never say culture as their top priority. This is the general public. But if you change the questions and you ask people why they love your city, what's the most important thing in their city, it's culture. So we try to ask a different question. What is of value to people? And when you ask what is really of value to people, they say culture and creativity. And so I think as government, we have to be nuanced. We have to see the range of things that our citizens care about and adopt policies that meet those aspirations. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Alors, Tania Chorfi, je suis sociologue de l'art et je gère la culture depuis pratiquement 33 ans ici au Maroc. Et je voudrais dire que, avant d'arriver à la question, je voudrais d'abord dire ce que ces 33 ans de gestion de la culture m'ont permis de relever. Donc la culture aujourd'hui dans notre pays, bien sûr, elle permet de renforcer notre identité. Elle permet également, quand je parle de la créativité, je dis cette créativité est très très importante parce que quand on est créatif, eh bien, ça permet justement de devenir souple et flexible. Je rejoins ce qu'a dit Monsieur le ministre tout à l'heure. Aujourd'hui, on a besoin justement de développer cette créativité parce qu'on sait que c'est comme ça que, par exemple, quelqu'un qui va devenir plus tard ingénieur, quand on va lui dire, monsieur, vous ne pouvez pas travailler à Casablanca, par exemple, à l'OCP, mais que vous devez aller à Khlibga, il ira sans aucun problème s'il a été créatif, si durant sa jeunesse, si enfant, on l'a emmené au théâtre, on lui a permis de peindre, on lui a permis de chanter, de prendre un cours de musique, etc., il deviendra créatif. Et si plus tard, à l'âge adulte, quand il a justement un métier, si c'est pas le plan A, c'est le plan B, si c'est pas le plan B, c'est le plan C, etc., la créativité permet justement de devenir souple et flexible dans une société. la créativité, l'art et la culture, et on le sait, je n'ai pas besoin de dire ces choses-là, nous permettent de dialoguer avec le reste du monde et d'être fiers d'être marocains et de pouvoir dialoguer les yeux dans les yeux avec le reste du monde en disant voilà, derrière nous, il y a un passé, il y a une histoire et il y a également ce que nous faisons aujourd'hui. Et la créativité permet également, si je reprends la phrase d'Edgar Morin, bien de développer la pensée complexe. C'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, au lieu d'analyser les choses en disant oui ou non, ça nous permet justement de nuancer nos propos, de baser nos analyses sur différents critères et de ne pas juste trancher dans un sens ou dans l'autre. Donc la créativité aujourd'hui, l'art, la culture, etc. sont bien sûr des éléments extrêmement importants. Alors j'en arrive à tous les lieux culturels que nous avons. Et je peux en parler puisque j'ai travaillé à la Fondation ONA pendant 27 ans et j'étais donc à la Villa des Arts de Casablanca où gérais le culturel. Et c'est pas parce qu'un musée est gratuit. La Villa des Arts était un lieu gratuit. Et c'est pas pour autant que nous avions du public. D'accord? Et nous avons beaucoup de manifestations. Mais très souvent, bien, quand je descendais dans les salles d'exposition, il y avait très peu de visiteurs en dehors des vernissages, des soirs des vernissages, ou en dehors de quand nous avions des conférences. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons des musées qui sont vraiment très beaux, qui ont été restaurés, qui ont été rénovés. Il y a un effort incroyable dans notre pays et on en est très fiers. Mais en même temps, on doit absolument se pencher sur cette consommation culturelle. Que faire pour que l'ensemble des Marocains aient ce désir d'aller dans le musée? C'est-à-dire, les musées existent. Mais en même temps, il faut qu'il y ait une consommation culturelle. Que faisons-nous? Et moi, je pense qu'il faut commencer par les écoles. C'est-à-dire que l'enfant d'aujourd'hui est l'adulte de demain. Et l'enfant d'aujourd'hui, quand il prendra l'habitude d'aller dans les musées, il ira forcément à 18 ans, 20 ans, 30 ans, il rentrera au musée comme nous, on va au cinéma parce qu'on a eu l'habitude d'aller au cinéma et on va voir un film. Bon, peut-être moins maintenant, mais disons que c'est une habitude à prendre. Et je pense qu'il y a vraiment un travail à faire au niveau du ministère de l'Éducation nationale pour sensibiliser déjà au niveau des programmes et pour sensibiliser les enfants et pour permettre à tous ces enfants qui ne viennent pas toujours, ça dépend des bus scolaires, ça dépend de plein de paramètres, faire de sorte que ces jeunes-là viennent. Et voilà, et alors maintenant j'en arrive à ma question. Que faites-vous à Londres pour toucher tous les publics? Parce qu'on sait bien qu'on ne peut pas parler de public juste, on en parle au pluriel et pas au singulier. Donc, il y a différents types de publics. Et je sais que les enfants à Londres, etc., vont dans les musées. Mais que faire pour toucher, par exemple, le troisième âge? Pour que ces gens-là viennent, quelle est votre politique? Et moi, j'aimerais tant également voir des personnes ici de 70 ans pousser la porte du musée et rentrer. Que faire? Voilà, c'est ma question. Merci.
Thank you. Very good question. I think, everyone has this challenge where often culture is seen as an elite activity. And so all of my colleagues across the World Cities Culture Forum, we're all very focused on allowing all of our communities to equally access culture. And people are doing it in a whole variety of ways, depending on the circumstances, the culture, the environment, the city. In London, I think we look at this through many different angles. I think I'll start by saying we haven't achieved it. We'll never achieve it. This is a journey we will always be on. We just have to keep being better at it, right? It's not a destination when we've done it. It's an evolving challenge. Because London is a global city. There's always new communities coming into London, lots of immigration. We are a big world city. So it's we have to pay constant attention to all of London's communities all the time. So how do we do it? Lots of different people are doing lots of different things at City Hall. We do a lot with education. For example, I run a big sculpture program in Trafalgar Square called the Fourth Plinth. It's the biggest sculpture competition. And in schools all across London, we have a schools award. So all the school children are also making sculptures that they imagine they'd want to see chosen for the big platform on the Fall Plinth. And if you're a school child, you're then familiar with it. You know what it is. You're thinking about contemporary art. It's then only a smaller step then into a gallery. So we're trying to always create these access points into schools. Again, with the London Borough of Culture, very much working in schools. All the schools get involved in it. We run theatre projects in schools, community projects. Most of the time it's about familiarity. We have a lot of data about theatre visits. If you go to the theatre when you're a child, you feel it's for you. And you're much more likely to go again as a teenager and again as an adult. So making those interventions and making it familiar really is really important. Other things we're doing about representation is thinking about who people see. Who are the statues, who are the monuments, who are the murals. In London, lots of our public realm is a kind of Victorian story. So very focused around bronze statues. So we're doing programs that bring different stories into the public realm. Murals of people you might not know about from different communities. So it's also about who you see represented as well as what you experience as a member of the audience. And then as a practitioner, as a job, encouraging artists, encouraging people to take jobs from all different parts of the community. So we want our creative industries to look like our community, look like the demographic of our population. So we have quite a variety of different schemes going on.
Yeah, I would like to ask you my question in English. My name is Yusuf Amin Lalami. I happen to be a university professor, but also a creative writer. I would like to thank you for your very interesting, pertinent, and I would say thought-provoking presentation. I've heard you speak about all kinds of arts. You talked about dance. We could see you with a dance company. You talked about just a while ago about sculpture. You talked about visual arts. We've seen some pictures of graffiti and street art, punk culture. And I haven't heard anything about writers. And I just want to know, what do you do in London for writers? Because not much is done here. And this is why I'm asking you the question. So I just want to know.
Thank you. It's interesting. Whenever we write the cultural policy for London, people always go through it and say, have you named everyone? So it's a good question. So in City Hall, mainly we're focused on this idea of acupuncture. So this is, where can we make a difference as London government, and where is there a need? And so there are already in London many organisations who support young writers. So the theatres have got many young writing schemes. They're funded by our Arts Council. We have the Poetry Society. We have the Writers' Society. So there's a lot already of organisations who are supporting writers. So we tend to go for where the kind of problems are in London. You know, the film industry needs help to boost it. There's jobs over here and people don't know how to get them, or they don't have the skills. So we're always thinking, where can we add the value? We try not to duplicate what other people are doing. We try to get into the spaces that we can best get in to support the creative industries, if that makes sense.
No, I'll ask in English. D'abord, bonjour, merci beaucoup. Je suis Karim Hendili, responsable du programme de l'UNESCO pour culture pour le Maghreb. So I'll ask my question in English. So as head of culture program of UNESCO for the Maghreb area, you can imagine that your words sound like music to my ears, because the role of culture and sustainable development, of course, is something that within the United Nations system, something has been proven. And as UNESCO, we are really carrying strong advocacy for that. I have two questions. First one is, you have at some point highlighted in your presentation the importance of the action at local level. And of course, being from, the local authority, so you're at the heart of this process. Would you say that London being the capital, the process is the same in other cities of the UK? In other words, are there the same, let's say, is there the same context for achieving what has so far been achieved in London? This is the first question, because I think for countries, not only for Morocco, but other countries, it's very important to see also whether what works in capitals can work in other areas, particularly the areas are in remote areas. The second question is, would you say that there is in London, in the process that has been initiated, a change of paradigm somehow, moving from having culture as an expenditure within the budget, be it at national level or local level, to investing in culture? But really in the strong economic sense of investing, the sense that if you bring investors, they want to earn money and get money back from their investments. Experience has shown that this is what works somehow in the world, and it will be very interesting to see whether you could say a few words about it in London and whether it works in this way. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Big questions. Okay, the first question I think was about, is it comparable, the work that's happening in London, with other cities around the UK? Yeah, so I would say yes. You know, there's big cities who are also foregrounding culture, the city of Manchester, Edinburgh, Coventry more recently. Lots of cities are focused on their creative economy. I think the difference with London is the challenges are quite acute because it's so expensive. Things like finding a studio space are much more difficult in London than they are in other cities around. The cost is higher and it's more competitive. Funding for art and culture is more competitive in London because there's just more people wanting that studio, wanting that public grant. So I would say it's more acute. And then the other difference for London is scale. So, you know, it's a 9 million population city, so it is the biggest city. So everything we're dealing with is at scale. And that's why I founded the World Cities Culture Forum. And it's particularly about global cities because the challenges you have as a global city are quite distinct and there's a lot in common. We have a lot more in common with New York and in Tokyo and with Paris than we do with the smaller cities around London because the scale of the challenges are just greater. That's question one. The two was about the paradigm shift, right? So it was about investment. What has happened to investment?
In the sense that moving from spending money on culture, putting it in the budget, to really bringing investors as any other economic sector, to really make money and make the engine, increasing its production.
I would say what's true in London is that these two things are like an ecosystem. So the publicly funded culture and the commercial investments, they're not two separate worlds. They do integrate together. So I'm trying to think of a good example. There's a show called War Horse. I don't know if anyone's seen the film War Horse. It started in the studio in a publicly funded small theatre. And then it went on to the big stage in that National Theatre. And then it transferred into the commercial West End, so commercially viable. And then it became a Hollywood movie. So this is the same story that started in a book, small theatre, big theatre, even bigger theatre, and movie. And you couldn't have had the movie without the public investment. So there's definitely an ecosystem there. And I think that's the same in many of the creative industries. But you need everything. You know, I would argue that you have to have the public investment because that's where the experimentation happens. Because, you know, you've got that investment, you're interested in, to the questioner over there, if you are publicly funded, you have a civic duty to reach all of society. So for me, it's really important that government is at the table and is part of the equation, as well as growing it from a commercial and investment point of view. Not one or the other. Was that the right answer? Any more questions?
Hi.
Couple on the front row.
Oh, bonjour.
Hello.
I'm Calvin Dark. I'll ask my question in English. You can probably tell this American accent. I wanted to know what recommendations you have for detangling politics from the pursuit of culture and art, particularly, you know, when it's government funded. One of the challenges I think I see in the United States is art is always subjective. And we have a particular committee, for example, in our government, in the Senate, that looks behind every artist, every project to see, you know, what was the political message for it. And then they say, well, the government shouldn't support it. And so that discourages a lot of the government involvement. And then the other side is, you know, you were talking about making sure everybody has access. We had a recent situation in Boston where there's an abstract sculpture to honor Martin Luther King. Okay. It was with the hands. Well, I had to find out what it was. It was abstract, you know, I appreciated it, but it was $10 million. And the communities that Martin Luther King would have wanted to help around Boston can't get funding for their needs. And so there was a bitter taste in their mouths after that. And I think the problem was nobody explained the importance of the art. They basically said, we can't pay for school lunch, but here's a $10 million abstract statue. So how do you deal with communicating that to all audiences? And how do you detangle the politics if it's the government taking the lead in these?
Good questions. Welcome to my world. That is my world. One of my favorite quotes is by the artist Ai Weiwei. And he said, everything is art, everything is politics. I think it is a kind of, it's a choreography, I think, because you're absolutely right. You know, politics is a blunt instrument and art is nuanced. And, you know, in my job, I'm sitting in the middle of that. And that's why I love spending time with my other international colleagues, because they're also trying to navigate a very complicated world. I think, I mean, even thinking about, I mean, I often say that, you know, government and politics is about minimizing risk, right? Always you're coming at something and you're looking at it and you're saying, what is the least risk scenario? How can I mitigate that risk? What could go wrong and how could I mitigate that? Whether it's health and safety, whether it's political, that's the world of government, right? Mitigate risk. The world of art and culture is, how can we take some risks? Let's take more. Let's do something different, right? So it's a very contested space. I think my advice is, you alluded to it really. It's the empathy model really. It's about kind of making sure that you've thought of the scenario from everyone's different perspective. So I'm thinking, what will a politician think about this? What will someone from the community, what will the artist? It is an exercise in empathy and in just really trying to understand the other perspectives and creating those bridges and getting people together. Because often I find when you explain a piece of art to someone, they often just need a way into it and then they love it. Often it's just that kind of layer, you know, often with the Fourth Plinth project I alluded to. Usually we pick things that work on different levels. So, you know, we recently commissioned a piece by the artist Yinka Shonobare, and it was a ship in a bottle. And the sails of the bottle were African fabrics, right? And so people could look at it in Trafalgar Square and say, wow, it's a ship in a bottle. Isn't that beautiful? And how did he get the ship in the bottle? So you can see it that way. And then if you look at the plaque, you've got some words from the artist, and he's talking about the story of immigration in Britain. And the story of the piece is, you know, despite all of this colonialism, one actual positive thing was that we're now this great multicultural international city, you know, and that's the thing, that's the story he wanted to tell. So I think it's that kind of opening that door, having that conversation. You know, I looked at lots of the press articles about that sculpture, the Martin Luther King, and it was very polarized, wasn't it? You know, lots of people absolutely loved it, and lots of people said, what does it mean? It's too abstract. And as you say, we've got other priorities. So, you know, it's got to be about empathy and, as you say, about bringing people into the conversation. Always bring people into the conversation. Never assume anything. Would be my takeaway. Really good questions there. Okay. How are we doing for time, by the way? Are we okay? 2 more?
Bonjour. Oui, je m'appelle Abdelrahman Wardan. Je suis artiste plasticien et je suis vice-président de la Fédération des industries culturelles et créatives. Évidemment, comme vous avez dit, la culture, et personne ne peut le nier, est extrêmement importante puisqu'elle n'est pas une option, mais comme vous avez si bien dit, c'est carrément une priorité. Mais aujourd'hui, dans une ambiance plutôt mondialisée, nous vivons la mondialisation aujourd'hui, il y a ce caractère universel de la culture qui s'impose, c'est-à-dire une culture qui va au-delà des frontières, une culture qui va vers les autres cultures pour évidemment conjuguer et pour produire la nouvelle culture mondialisée. Or, aujourd'hui, il y a un grand frein, c'est-à-dire que nous nous heurtons au problème de la mobilité, c'est-à-dire le déplacement des artistes et des œuvres. Alors, quelles sont les actions menées à Londres pour essayer de transcender ce problème et de le résoudre? Merci.
Thank you. Can I just check the question? Are you asking about the movement of artists, the movement of instruments, the movement of artworks across borders? Is that the question? Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. You know, it's become harder. It's become harder for the UK too because of Brexit. So we've left the European Union, which was our biggest trading partner. And in the creative industries, 40% of our creative economy trade is with the EU, was with the EU. So there are particular challenges. So yeah, it's a current challenge. The movement of artists, musical instruments, the movement of artworks, freight is challenging. You know, all of these things are challenges. And I think we still are working our way through. For clarification, those are questions for our national government. So the Mayor of London doesn't have any power over these things. So we just do our best to advocate on behalf of our creative community to government around those technical issues of trade and movement of people and goods. Okay, question?
Yeah.
French, English?
French. Mohamed Amin Mahfoudi, je suis chercheur en transformation digitale. Donc, j'ai quelques petites questions. D'abord, merci pour votre présentation, très belle présentation, 360 degrés autour de l'art. Alors, je suis chercheur à l'Université Côte d'Azur, et spécialement au laboratoire Transition, dans un institut à Nice qui s'appelle l'IMRED, l'Institut méditerranéen de développement durable. Et dans cet institut-là, on travaille sur beaucoup de sujets qui ont attrait à la ville intelligente, à la smart city. Et ce qui m'a attiré un peu dans dans les travaux qu'on fait de temps en temps au sein de ce laboratoire, c'est que les informaticiens ne travaillent pas seuls. Il y a beaucoup de sociologues, il y a beaucoup d'anthropologues qui travaillent dans les sujets de la smart city, de la data-driven city, de la data-driven, des citizen data-driven, etc., etc. Et en vous écoutant parler, je me suis rappelé un échange qu'il y avait eu une fois entre nous sur comment digitaliser, comment ramener la transformation digitale dans le monde culturel. Il est vrai que digitaliser, transformer des services publics, des administrations, des entreprises, des métiers, etc., ça a de plus en plus de sens. Ça évite aux citoyens de se déplacer, par exemple, pour des services qu'ils peuvent se permettre de chez soi. Mais que fait-on pour la culture? J'ai vu que vous avez parlé beaucoup de la pandémie. Mais en discutant avec mes amis, enfin avec mes collègues informaticiens, sociologues, etc., nous nous sommes posé la question, est-ce que si on investit le monde culturel par autant de forces digitales, est-ce qu'on ne va pas ramener la pandémie d'une autre manière? Pourquoi? Parce que il est très facile de se faire livrer son repas. Mais c'est merveilleux aussi de le prendre dans un bain de foule. C'est aussi merveilleux de regarder son film, comme les Simpsons, Netflix chez soi, mais c'est aussi merveilleux d'aller au cinéma et voir le film. Voir les salles de cinéma désertées parce que tout se fait digitalement chez soi est un phénomène qui pourrait totalement détruire la culture d'une ville et la culture d'un pays. Donc, comment à Londres, qui a vécu la digitalisation depuis des dizaines d'années, comment vous faites pour garder autant de monde dehors, avec autant de digital chez soi? C'est ma question. Voilà.
Okay, I think people leave. Should we make this the last question? Good. Okay, so the question was about a balance, really, between digital and real life. I think that's the key, isn't it? Creating that balance. So that's what we're really trying to do. Sorry, I've got this moving here. I've got a colleague at City Hall who's the head of our digital transformation. But I think in the creative economy, it's really about just bringing it as a tool, not to replace that human connection. It's got to be an addition, not a replacement. And that's the basic principle, I think. The thing that everyone really missed in the pandemic was the human connection. If we're watching a theatre show, we're all together in one place. We're all on the emotional journey of the play. We're following it through. And maybe we go for a drink afterwards and we discuss it. And nothing can really replace that human connection, that conversation. And that's what we were doing with some of these programs. The cinemas were in outdoor spaces, but it was part of a bigger campaign, and it was called Back to the Big Screen. And that was about encouraging people to see a movie as the director intended it in the movie theatre. If you look at kind of fashion, digital, and real life coming together, same with film. I think for us as government, it's all about balance, because we have to remember that not everyone has access to digital technology. In the pandemic, schools and education went online, but in London, 30% of young people live in poverty. They don't have laptops. So the deprivation was amplified because people didn't have the tech. So we've always got to the other questioner's point about access. We've got to remember that everyone doesn't have access to digital technology, and in our world. So we've got to kind of remember everyone and create that balance. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I've really enjoyed it. I'm having a fantastic time in Rabat, and I think maybe there's a coffee outside. Let's have a coffee and a conversation. Thank you so much.
Mesdames et messieurs, merci d'avoir été parmi nous. Nous avons été honorés de votre présence. Je vous dis à très vite pour la prochaine conférence, Inch'Allah.